I want to just say I'm very honored. It's been a long time since Senior Magazine sat down with
Oh,
you.
yes.
You were on the cover a while
On the
back.
cover. That was fabulous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
What, 5 or 6 years
5 or
ago?
6 years
Yeah.
ago. I've only been there about a year,
Uh-huh.
so once again, I'm just kind of overwhelmed to be here.
Don't say that, please. I'm just like everybody else in this world. Come on.
All right.
Seriously.
So this restaurant's been here for 20 years
20 years.
now. And tell me a little bit about this building and how you
Well,
selected.
well, the building selected me, really. This is how old is it? 1861. It was built in 1861, and it was a landmark. Actually, before you leave, go straight there and take a look, and there is how the old bar used to be.
Okay.
It was considered the biggest water hole in Sacramento. It was from here to down there, all the, I don't know, 25 chairs, and people were coming in and drinking. And the whole building was kind of interesting because they had on the second floor there were house of ill repute, bad things happening up there. Downstairs they were making booze, and so it has a very colorful history. So
Okay.
when I found it, they were beginning to retrofit it, to fix it.
Right.
And I don't live too far away from here. When I saw it, I said, this is such a beautiful building. It would be great if I could put a restaurant there.
Sure.
And so just we tried and it happened.
Okay. So, what were some of the dishes you put on the menu when you first opened? I know you did a tasting, like a sampling, just recently of what you had, but what
Right.
were some of those like?
Oh, God, I wish I remember. I tell you that my menu when I opened was quite small. It doesn't look at all like what I have now. But I started out with the type of food that I knew better, that I knew well enough, and so I began with the dishes of my region, which is Emilia Romagna, and we began by making homemade pasta that nobody was doing in Sacramento at that
Right.
time, and then all the traditional sauces of the area where I came from. And so I began slowly with a bunch of dishes that I knew fairly well.
Okay. Were they comparable? So they were comparable to the ones in your first cookbook, then?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Because my book came out before I opened the
Right.
restaurant.
Just
The
right
book is
before.
about 25 years old now.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So how old were your children when the restaurant opened?
Well, one was in college, and the other one was about 14. So she's 34 now, so yes. So one was gone, and the other one was driving me crazy.
Oh, okay. So how did you balance your home life and your work
It was
life?
very difficult,
It
very
is
difficult.
difficult.
Because first of all, nobody told me. I knew it was going to be difficult to. This is one of the hardest jobs in the world. There are about I don't know exactly the percentage, but 90 something percentage of failure.
Exactly.
So it's really very tough. And I started with no knowledge whatsoever of the business of the
Right.
restaurant. What I knew was the food.
Right.
And my husband said, you know, the most important thing, you know, the food, what you want to do. I had been teaching Italian cooking for 17 years. And so I knew that the food that I taught people were crazy for. So I knew that I could get people good food, but I didn't know anything about the business. So we hired a manager, we hired good people in the kitchen, and each person helped out with whatever it is that they knew they contributed. But the first year was very tough, very, very tough. I would work 18 hours a day. It was just horrible.
When was the turnaround? When did you start to see things kind of be profitable?
In terms of money or in
Just
terms
in
of
terms
work?
of coming back, like people coming back, regular customers, things like that.
Well, the first year, it wasn't the first year. I would say, though, after 3 or 4 years,
3 or 4 years.
the restaurant began to move fairly decently. And we had wonderful waiters. I had this man here who's been here forever. We changed the things from the from management. We really began to manage, and so it took quite a while. But I was driven,
Uh-huh.
and I wasn't going to fail because I was willing to work as many hours as I had to. And I'm a very fast learner, so I put everything I had into this.
Okay. So I want to go back to where you're from. What was your life like growing up?
Well, it was quite good, except with the exception when I lived through Second World War,
Right.
and I was 9 years old when the war ended. So I remember very vividly many very horrible things, and we made it. We survived. We lost a lot of things, like most people at that time. Jobs, the house where we lived was kind of ransacked. But when you are young, you have an amazing sense of survival, and so you go on with your life. And our parents were good people, and I grew up a happy child, maybe because we survived the war when many people didn't. And that's it. I
Okay.
come from a beautiful city with wonderful food.
Well, I was most moved when I was reading about you describing your mother making polenta. So could you tell our readers, explain the dish, if for those who don't know what it is, and tell them about your
Sure.
mom?
Yeah, immediately after the war, there was nothing to eat. I mean, whether you had money or not, unless you stashed things away, there was nothing. I mean, Italy was half destroyed. And so every day we didn't know where the food was coming from. But because my mother had a sister who was a farmer, she was able to give us occasionally eggs or flowers or little things like that. And one dish that my mother would make very often was the polenta, because with a handful of cornmeal, just water, you would really make something very, very nourishing. And so she would make this big batch of polenta, just topped with whatever she could get.
Right.
Maybe just a touch of butter or just a touch of olive oil, or if she could get her hands on some cheese, she would melt it and put it on top. And they tell you, when you're hungry, that food is the best food that you have ever had.
Well, I love polenta
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
so yeah.
Well, today is very different.
Yeah.
Today is rich with
Uh-huh.
wonderful cheeses. Yes, I love polenta.
So you basically learned to cook from your mom and just
Yeah, oh, yeah,
watching everything
absolutely.
she did.
It is this cycle of life in Italy.
Right.
Things are changing today, very much so. But when I grew up, that's what you did. You lived basically in the kitchen. Even if you were affluent, the kitchen has always been the center of the home for the majority of the Italian, whether you have money or not. And there, the aromas were all around you. And don't forget that at one time, there were 2 meals a day, and women cooked twice a day. And they didn't have dishwasher, and they did the dishes, and they did the shopping.
Uh-huh.
But then at one time, the women didn't work, the majority of the women didn't work outside the home like the majority of women work today. So that was their job. And it was just so you grew up with this wonderful aroma and with these dishes that are impossible to forget. That's how I learned.
So did you always know you wanted to cook for other people?
No, not at all.
No?
I didn't want to
When,
cook.
oh, you didn't?
When you are
And when
young,
did
do you
that-
think you want to cook? You want to eat. But
Yes.
no, I was only interested in finishing school or going out with my friends, and cooking was the last thing in my mind
Okay, so that didn't start until you came
until
here.
I got married.
And so you got
Yeah.
married, and then you came here.
And I came, well, from Bologna, I moved to New York. I met
Right.
my husband, who went to medical school in Bologna,
Right.
but he was born and raised in New York City from Italian parents. And so we moved to New York, and I lived there for 9 years. And there I had a job at an Italian bank, and I was having a great time. And occasionally I would cook, but we were young and we had a good time. We wanted to go out. We tried out tons of restaurants.